My mother's cruel Christmas joke about me being an unwanted burden was just the beginning. Months later, she and my sister forged my name to steal my home. They never saw the trap I'd set, and ended up begging for mercy on the very doorstep they'd tried to claim. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The scent of roasting turkey and pine needles always makes my stomach clench. It shouldn't. It should smell like home, like joy. But for me, it smells like an obligation, a performance I am destined to fail. This Christmas was no different. The air in my parents' house was thick with forced cheer, the glittering tinsel on the tree seeming to mock the dull, heavy tension that settled over all of us. I am Amy, 36 years old. By all outside metrics, I am a successful woman. I have a demanding job as a data analyst, a quiet apartment I love, and a life I've painstakingly built for myself, brick by brick, far from the emotional quicksand of my family. But twice a year, Thanksgiving and Christmas, I wade back in, telling myself it's the right thing to do. My family is a small, unbalanced solar system. My mother, Marlene, is the fiery, demanding son. At 59, she still maintains the air of a sacrificial mother, a woman who gave up a supposed life of glamour to raise her children, a debt she implies we can never repay. My father, Albert, is a distant moon, orbiting her gravity, his 60 years of life having taught him that silence is the easiest path. And then there is Hannah, my older sister. 38, unemployed, and perpetually brimming with brilliant new projects. Hannah is the golden child, the planet Marlene dotes on. And I am the afterthought, the second child, the trouble. Dinner was progressing as usual. Hannah was detailing her latest venture, a bespoke, artisanal candle-making business that apparently required a significant startup loan from our parents. Marlene was hanging on her every word, her eyes bright. "Oh, Hannah, that's just brilliant. You always had the artistic soul." Albert nodded along, spooning gravy onto his potatoes. "Sounds great, honey." I sat silently, nursing a glass of water my plate barely touched. I had learned long ago that my own achievements, a promotion, a complex project I'd successfully led, were met with vacant stares or, worse, passive-aggressive comments from Marlene about how some people have it easy. "And Amy," Marlene said, suddenly turning her bright, sharp gaze on me, the table went quiet. "You're being awfully quiet. Are you feeling all right? You look peaky." "I'm fine, Mom, just tired from work." "Work, always work," she sighed, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "You know, all that stress is going to give you wrinkles. You should try to relax more. Maybe find a nice man." "I'm happy as I am, Mom." Marlene let out a sharp, tinkling laugh. It was a sound that set my teeth on edge. Oh, to be young and naive again. She turned to the table at large. My aunt and uncle were there, too, quiet enablers in their own right. "You know," Marlene said, raising her glass of wine, "I was just thinking about it the other day." This was her stage. She was about to perform. "I was thinking about when I had Hannah." She smiled, a warm, genuine smile that she reserved only for my sister. It was so wonderful. She was such a perfect baby, a little angel. Hannah beamed, "Oh, Mom." "And then," Marlene continued, her gaze sliding over to me, her smile tightening, "then this one came along." She gestured at me with her glass, and I swear. She paused for dramatic effect. I could feel the heat rising in my neck. I just stared at my plate. Don't react. Don't give her the satisfaction. Marlene laughed again, that bright, brittle sound. "If I'd known how much trouble 2 kids would be," she announced to the table, "I'd have taken those pills right after your sister was born." The table exploded. My aunt and uncle roared with laughter. Albert chuckled, "Oh, Marlene, you're terrible." Hannah giggled, covering her mouth. "Mom, that's awful," she said, but she was smiling, her eyes shining with mirth. Everyone laughed. Except me. I sat frozen, the fork halfway to my mouth. The words echoed in the sudden silence that followed the laughter. "I'd have taken those pills, taken those pills. It wasn't a joke. It was the truth of my existence, said aloud. I was the trouble, the unwanted one, the burden she was forced to bear. I carefully placed my fork down on the edge of my plate. The sound was unnaturally loud in the room. I looked up and met my mother's gaze. She was still smiling, a triumphant, challenging look in her eyes. She had landed her punch, and she knew it. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Amy, where are you going?" Albert asked, his face a mask of mild confusion. "You haven't finished your pie." "I'm not feeling well," I said, my voice gaining a small measure of strength. I grabbed my purse from the entryway. "I think I'm going to head home." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Marlene snapped, her good humor vanishing. "Don't be so sensitive, Amy. It was a joke." "A hilarious one," I said, pulling my coat on. My hands were shaking. "Merry Christmas, everyone." I walked out the door, closing it gently behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't yell. I just left. I made it to my car before the first sob broke free. I sat in the cold, dark vehicle for a long time, the festive lights of my parents' house blurring through my tears. It wasn't just the joke. It was the laughter. It was the casual, joyful agreement from everyone at that table that my entire existence was, and always had been, a punchline. That night, something inside me didn't just break. It hardened. The part of me that had spent 36 years hopelessly trying to earn their approval, to be seen as something other than the trouble, finally gave up. The betrayal was worse than any physical blow. It was the final, definitive severing of a tie I was the only one still holding. The 2 days after Christmas were a blur of hollow silence. I called in sick to work, citing a migraine, which wasn't entirely a lie. The emotional hangover was a physical weight pressing down on my chest and skull. I unplugged my Christmas lights. I ate toast and drank tea and stared out my apartment window at the gray, frozen city. I felt empty. The anger and hurt from Christmas night had cooled into a hard, cold resolve. I was done. No more holidays. No more phone calls. No more sending money I couldn't really spare just to keep the peace. I was performing a silent, internal amputation, cutting off the toxic limb of my family before it poisoned me completely. On the third day, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed, HANNAH. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the decline button. A part of me, the old, conditioned Amy, whispered that I should answer, that maybe she was calling to apologize. Maybe she'd realized how cruel that joke was. I sighed and answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Hello, Hannah." "Amy, hey, merry late Christmas." Her voice was obnoxiously cheerful, as if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't fled her dinner table in tears. "Hi, Hannah, what's up?" "Oh, just working on the business plan for Hannah's Hearth. That's the candle company name. Do you love it? Anyway, I'm just finalizing the numbers for the initial supplies. The high-grade soy wax and the essential oils are not cheap." I closed my eyes. Here it came. "And well, Mom and Dad are helping a ton," she continued, her voice taking on a slightly wheedling tone, "but I'm still just a little bit short for the first big order. And I was thinking, since you're doing so well." "No," I said. The line went silent. I could hear her breathing. "What?" "No, Hannah, I'm not giving you any money." "Whoa," she said, her voice instantly losing its bubbly charm and turning flat. "What's your problem? I'm not asking for a handout I'll pay you back. It's an investment." "It's never an investment, Hannah. It's a gift, and I'm done giving them." "My God, Amy, what is wrong with you?" Her voice was rising, that familiar entitled whine creeping in. "You're still sulking about Christmas, aren't you? Mom said you would be. You're so dramatic. It was a joke. You always ruin everything by being so sensitive." "She said my existence was a mistake and you all laughed," I said, my voice as cold and flat as hers. "I don't find that particularly funny." "You're just jealous," Hannah shot back, her voice now sharp with anger. "You're jealous that Mom and I are so close, that she supports my dreams. You're selfish, Amy. You have all this money from your stupid, boring job and you just hoard it. You're so ungrateful. Ungrateful. That was their favorite word for me. Ungrateful for the childhood of being second best. Ungrateful for the scraps of affection they threw my way. I have to go, Hannah. You know what? Fine, be that way. But don't come crying to us when you're old and alone because you've pushed everyone away. She slammed the phone down. I sat in the silence, but this time I didn't cry. I felt a strange, cold clarity, pushed everyone away. As if I weren't the one who had been shoved out of the family circle my entire life. I stood up and walked to my desk. Tucked in the back of a drawer, beneath old tax returns, was a thick leather-bound folder. I pulled it out. Inside was a set of documents, chief among them a deed and a sheaf of legal papers. My gaze drifted to a framed photo on my bookshelf. It was me, age 10, standing on the porch of a small, rustic cabin. Standing next to me was M. Why grandmother, my mother's mother, a woman who had been nothing like her daughter. Grandma Evelyn had been quiet, sharp, and saw everything. She had seen how Marlene treated me. She had seen Hannah's bottomless appetite for attention. She had seen Albert's weakness. When she passed away, she left me one thing. Not money, something better. That cabin. It was 2 hours north, nestled in the woods by a lake. It was my sanctuary, the only place on earth I felt truly safe. My family, of course, resented it. Marlene had been furious, claiming she should have inherited it. But Grandma Evelyn had been meticulous. I looked at the trust documents. I thought about Hannah's words. Selfish, ungrateful. I thought about Marlene's laugh. They always treated me like I wasn't really family. Like I was a temporary guest, a burden. They had taken every bit of goodwill I had and burned it for fuel. I ran my finger over the raised seal on the document. A small, cold smile touched my lips. You're right, Hannah, I whispered to the empty room. I am selfish. I'm selfish with the one thing I've ever been given. They had forgotten what Grandma left me. They had forgotten who she was, and they had definitely forgotten that I was her granddaughter and a data analyst. They had no idea just how meticulous I could be. My cabin was my armor. It was the one part of my life my family hadn't been able to touch, and it wasn't for lack of trying. The reason they couldn't touch it was Grandma Evelyn. My grandmother was a formidable woman. While her daughter, Marlene, was all flash and noise and emotional theater, Evelyn was granite. She was a bookkeeper by trade, a woman who believed in ledgers, receipts, and the unassailable truth of numbers. She saw Marlene's manipulative nature, her bottomless pit of need. And she saw me, the quiet, overlooked child who preferred reading in a corner to fighting for the spotlight. When I was 16, she took me to the cabin. This place is special, Amy, she'd said, her hand on the rough wooden railing. It's not for noise, it's for peace. When she died, she didn't just leave me the cabin. She left it to the Evelyn Reed Trust, with me as the sole beneficiary and a crusty, brilliant lawyer named Mr. Henderson as the trustee. Marlene had thrown a fit that was still spoken of in hushed tones. She left it to Amy, a teenager. It should have been mine. I remembered Mr. Henderson, at the will reading, looking at her over his glasses. Evelyn was very clear, Marlene. The trust is ironclad. The property is for Amy's use and hers alone. It cannot be sold, mortgaged, or transferred without the trustee's express consent. And I do not consent. That was the end of that, or so I thought. My family's resentment of my success was directly tied to their resentment of that cabin. To them, my life was an affront. I hadn't paid my dues. I was a data analyst, a job they didn't understand. She just sits at a computer all day, Marlene would say, as if it were some frivolous hobby. My 6-figure salary, earned through a decade of brutal hours, a master's degree, and a mind for complex systems, was, in their eyes, unearned. And because it was unearned, it was communal. I'd lost count of the loans. There was the $5,000 for Hannah's photography business. It lasted until the camera was pawned. The $10,000 to help Mom and Dad out when Albert's pension was mismanaged, which I later found out was to pay for a cruise for Marlene and Hannah. I co-signed for an apartment for Hannah, which she then abandoned, leaving me with 3 months' rent and a bill for damages. Each time, I was the one who sorted it out. I was the one who made the calls, balanced the budgets, and absorbed the cost. And each time, I was met not with gratitude, but with impatience. "Well, it's a good thing you have all that money," Marlene would say, as if it were a natural resource she had a right to tap. The dynamic between Marlene and Hannah was a toxic, closed loop. Hannah, at 38, was still a child, living in my parents' house, her projects and dreams funded by Albert's pension and my reluctant generosity. Marlene enabled her, living vicariously through the daughter who was so much like her, dramatic, charming, and allergic to hard work. Albert, my father, was the ghost in the machine. His entire life was dedicated to keeping the peace, which meant placating Marlene. He would corner me at family events, pressing cash into my hand. "Here, Amy, 4, don't tell your mother." He saw the injustice, but he would never, ever speak up against it. His silence was his complicity. After the phone call with Hannah, the silence from their end was deafening. Days turned into a week, then a month. I felt the absence like a phantom limb, an ache where the constant, low-grade irritation used to be. I started to breathe easier. I went to the cabin on weekends. I hiked, I read, I sat by the frozen lake and felt, for the F. Time like myself. I was rebuilding, I was healing. And that, it turned out, was the one thing they truly could not forgive. My peace was their provocation. My independence was their insult. While I was rediscovering my strength in the quiet woods, they were in their living room, stewing in their shared resentment. And they were planning. My greatest mistake was underestimating just how far they would go. I had built a firewall around my emotions, but I had forgotten to check the one on my finances. I was a data analyst. I was meticulous. But I had never, in my darkest nightmares, imagined the person who would breach my data would be my own mother. Months passed. The frozen gray of winter thawed into the pale, watery green of spring. I kept my low-contact rule. I ignored the occasional passive-aggressive text from Marlene, "Hope you're happy all by yourself." I blocked Hannah's number after a string of increasingly angry, misspelled demands for money. I was, for the first time in my adult life, truly at peace. I was thriving. Then came the envelope. It was a Tuesday in early May. I came home from a long day at work, sorted through the usual junk mail, and found it. A plain white envelope, no return address, but a postmark from a town I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded. It wasn't a letter. It was a statement. Final notice of delinquency. My blood ran cold. It was from a bank, Crestline Financial, a name I had never heard of. It claimed I was 90 days past due on a loan. A $75,000 loan. I dropped my keys. This was a mistake. A scam. Phishing. My analyst brain clicked on, sorting through possibilities. I'm meticulous with my finances. I have 1 mortgage, 1 car payment, and 0 debt. I would know if I had a $75,000 loan. I was about to throw it away when I saw the collateral line. Property listed, 124 Willow Creek RD. I stopped breathing. That was the address. That was my cabin. This wasn't a scam. This was something else. My hands were shaking, but my mind was suddenly, terrifyingly sharp. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I went into work mode. I sat at my desk and pulled up my credit report. I ran all 3 bureaus, and there it was. My FICO score, which I'd kept pristine at over 800, had plummeted. A hard inquiry from Crestline Financial, dated 6 months ago, and a new, active loan for $75,000. Under status, it read, seriously delinquent. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. I felt the floor drop out from under me. Foreclosure. They were trying to take my cabin. There was no one else it could be. My mind raced. How was this possible? I'm the only one on the trust. The cabin can't be used as collateral. How did they? I looked at the date of the inquiry. 6 months ago, right after Christmas, right after I had cut them off. The rage I felt was so pure and so cold it was almost calming. They hadn't just insulted me, they hadn't just tried to guilt trip me, they had declared war. I didn't call the bank, I didn't call my family. I called Mr. Henderson. "Amy, what a pleasant surprise," he said, his voice gravelly. "Mr. Henderson, I have a situation. A serious one. Someone took out a $75,000 loan in my name, and they used the cabin as collateral." There was a heavy silence on the other end. "I see," he said, his voice losing all its warmth. "Are you in your office, Amy, or at home?" "At home." "Good, pour yourself a stiff drink, and then be in my office at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bring every piece of paper you have." The next morning, I was in his office at 8:45, a thick folder in my lap. His office was old world, mahogany, leather-bound books, the smell of coffee and old paper. He was a man from another era, and right then I was grateful for it. I laid the final notice and my credit report on his desk. He put on his reading glasses and studied them in silence for a full 5 minutes. He hummed, he steepled his fingers. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes sharp. "Amy," he said, "this is not just a mistake. This is bank fraud, this is identity theft, and this is impressively stupid." "Stupid? They're about to foreclose on my cabin." "No, they're not," he said, leaning back. "That's the stupid part, and the impressive part. To get this loan, they would have needed your social security number, your date of birth, and the deed to the property. Where would they get those things, Amy?" I felt sick. My desk, in my apartment, I gave Marlene a spare key for emergencies. I thought of the trust documents I kept in my desk drawer, not locked. Why would I lock them? "She must have come in, made copies." "Precisely," Henderson said. "She or Hannah or both took those documents to this Crestline Financial. It sounds like one of those second-chance lenders that doesn't ask too many questions. They saw the deed, or what they thought was a deed, and your personal information, and they handed over the money. The forgery on the signature must have been good enough to pass a cursory glance. So what do? We call the bank, we call the police." "Not yet," he held up a hand. "We do this my way, the clean way. First, we call the bank, but not to report the fraud. Not yet. I am going to call them as the trustee of the Evelyn Reed Trust. I am going to inform them that they have a clerical error, that they have attached a lien to a property that is held in an irrevocable trust and cannot be used as collateral. Ever." He was smiling now. It was not a nice smile. "Then what?" I asked. "Then, we see what they did with the money, and we wait. They've made their move, Amy. Now we make ours. You're a data analyst, you said. You like patterns. Well, these criminals are lazy. They're your family. They're going to follow a very predictable pattern, and I think we should let them." The dread of the next step was worse than the discovery. Mr. Henderson was firm. Before we moved, we had to be 100% certain who we were dealing with. "We know it's them, Amy," he'd said, "but in the eyes of the law, we don't. I need you to confront them. I need a reaction. I need you to see the look in their eyes when you say the word lawyer." So I drove. For the second time in 6 months, I found myself on the familiar, dread-filled path to my parents' house. This time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt nothing but a cold, humming anger. I didn't knock. I used the key I still had, the one Marlene had a copy of, and let myself in. They were in the living room, exactly as I'd pictured them. Marlene, Hannah, and Albert watching a game show. The television blared, but the atmosphere felt different, smug. There was an air of self-satisfaction that hadn't been there at Christmas. The sound of the door opening made them all jump. "Amy," Albert said, startled, climbing out of his recliner. "You're here, you didn't call." "I didn't think I needed to," I said. I walked to the center of the room and clicked the television off. The sudden silence was heavy. Marlene, lounging on the sofa, put her magazine down. Her eyes were narrow. "Well, this is a surprise. To what do we owe the honor, Amy? Come to finally apologize for your behavior." Hannah, sitting on the floor painting her toenails, just glanced at me before looking away. A small, superior smirk on her face. I didn't waste time. I pulled the final notice from my bag and threw it on the coffee table. "What is this?" Marlene glanced at it, then at me, her face a mask of perfect innocence. "I have no idea. It looks like your mail, dear. You know we don't get your mail." "It's a $75,000 loan," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Taken out in my name, from a bank I've never heard of." "Oh, goodness," Marlene said, pressing a hand to her chest. "Amy, are you in trouble? Did you gamble? You can tell us." "It was taken out using my cabin as collateral," I continued, locking my eyes on hers. "And it's in foreclosure." The silence that followed was different. The smugness evaporated. Hannah's hand, holding the nail polish brush, froze. Albert looked back and forth between me and Marlene, his face pale. "Foreclosure," Albert whispered. "Amy, your cabin." "That's impossible," Hannah said, her voice too high. It must be a mistake, a bank error." "That's what I thought," I said. "So I did some digging. I pulled my credit report. Someone used my social security number, my date of birth, and a forged copy of my signature to get this loan." Marlene stood up. She was a great actress. Her face was a perfect picture of maternal outrage. "My word, Amy, you've been a victim of identity theft. We have to call the police." "Albert, call the police." Albert fumbled for his phone. "Don't bother," I said. "I already know who did it." That stopped him. Marlene's mask of concern didn't waver, but her eyes turned to chips of ice. What are you implying, Amy?" "I'm implying," I said, "that someone in this room went into my apartment, into my desk, stole my personal documents, and forged my name to steal $75,000. "How dare you?" Marlene shrieked, her voice going from 0 to 100. "After all we have done for you, all the sacrifices I made, you come into my house and accuse us, you ungrateful." "So it was you," I said. "It wasn't a question." "Get out," she screamed. "Get out of my house." "You're right," Hannah suddenly piped up, her face red and splotchy. "You should go. You're crazy. We didn't do anything." Her voice cracked on the last word. It was a terrible, unconvincing lie. "I've spoken to my lawyer," I said. That was the magic word. That was the moment Mr. Henderson had been waiting for. Everything stopped. Marlene's fake rage vanished, replaced by a cold, reptilian stillness. Hannah looked like she was going to be sick. Albert just sank back into his chair, his face gray. Marlene's mask of the loving, sacrificial mother didn't just slip. It shattered and fell to floor. Her face, in that moment, was something I had never seen before. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. "A lawyer," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Of course, you were always like her, like Grandma Evelyn. You always thought you were better than us with your trust and your precious cabin." Hannah started to cry, real panic tears. Mom, what's going on?" you said. "Shut up, Hannah," Marlene snapped, not even looking at her. She kept her eyes locked on me. "You think you're so smart, Amy, but you're just a selfish, cold girl. You have so much. We just wanted. We deserved a little of it. That cabin should have been mine." There it was, the confession, wrapped in a shroud of entitlement. I just nodded. I had what I needed. "My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, will be in touch," I said, my voice shaking just slightly from the adrenaline. "He said to tell you that he's looking forward to discussing the legal definitions of forgery and bank fraud with you." I turned and walked to the door. "You'll regret this, Amy," Marlene screamed at my back. "You're tearing this family apart." "No, Mom," I said, pausing with my hand on the knob. I looked back at the three of them, Marlene, vibrating with rage, Hannah, a sobbing wreck, and Albert, a defeated old man. "You already did." I left, closing the door on the sound of my sister's panicked wails. I drove straight back to Mr. Henderson's office, the scene from the living room replaying in my mind. The hatred in my mother's eyes had seared itself into my memory. "She confessed," I said, sinking into the leather chair opposite his desk. "Not in so many words, but she admitted it. She said she deserved it." Mr. Henderson listened patiently, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "And the sister?" Panicked cried, she's the weak link. And the father. Paralyzed, he's a nonentity, I said, the words tasting like ash. Good, Mr. Henderson said, setting his pen down. Your mother's arrogance is her undoing, and the sister's panic is our leverage. He leaned forward, a grim satisfaction on his face. Now, Amy, let's talk about what they actually did. I've spent the last 24 hours on the phone with Crestline Financial's legal department. They are displeased. He explained the full picture, and it was so much worse and so much more pathetic than I had imagined. Your mother and sister weren't just trying to get quick cash, he said. This was a long con, a takeover. The plan was this. They forged my signature to get the $75,000 loan. The money was deposited into a brand new bank account, opened in my name, again with forged documents. They had been siphoning the money out in cash, likely to fund Hannah's business and pay off their own debts. But the real goal was the cabin. Their plan, Henderson explained, was to let the loan default. They intentionally missed the payments, triggering the delinquency notices. But why? Why ruin my credit? They don't care about your credit, Amy. They wanted the foreclosure. Their idiotic plan was that the bank would seize the cabin. Then they would use the remaining loan money, or perhaps get another loan from Albert's pension, to swoop in and buy the cabin at the foreclosure auction. They'd get it for pennies on the dollar, all with your money. They'd own your grandmother's legacy, and you'd be left with a $75,000 debt and a foreclosure on your record. They would have destroyed your financial life and stolen your only real asset in one fell swoop. I was speechless. The sheer, calculated malice of it, it was monstrous. But, I said, my voice small, you said they can't foreclose. This is when Mr. Henderson's grim smile returned, wider this time. And that, my dear, is the beautiful, beautiful trap. The Evelyn Reed Trust. Crestline's legal team is in full-blown panic. They issued a loan against an asset that is legally untouchable. The loan is void. The lien is void. They gave $75,000 to a fraudster, and they have zero collateral. So, what happens now? Now, the bank is going to pursue the people who defrauded them, and that is your mother and sister. But, I said, a new, cold thought entering my mind, they still have the money, and they still think they're going to get the cabin. Mr. Henderson's eyes gleamed. Exactly. They are currently operating under the assumption that their plan is working. The delinquency notices are piling up. They are waiting for that final notice that says the property is seized and going to auction. They are waiting to win. He leaned forward. So, Amy, I think we should let them. Crestline's fraud department is very cooperative. They want your mother and sister. They are willing to let us play this out. What are you proposing? I am proposing, he said, that we expedite the process. I have a friend who creates very official-looking documents. I think Marlene and Hannah are about to receive a let. Not from Crestline, but from a foreclosure and acquisitions company. A letter informing them that the property at 124 Willow Creek RD has been seized and that the auction date has been set. Or perhaps that the title has already reverted to the bank and is available for a cash buyout. You're going to fake a foreclosure notice, I whispered, the audacity of it dawning on me. I am going to give them the exact win they've been waiting for, he corrected me. I'm going to let them believe, for one glorious day, that their disgusting little plan worked. I'm going to let them drive up to that cabin, suitcases in hand, believing they are the new owners. He steepled his fingers. The bank will have their fraud investigators on site. The local police will be there as well as a civil standby for the property seizure. And you, Amy, you will be on the porch, waiting for them. A shiver ran down my spine. It was cold and it was brutal. And it was perfect. They think I'm a sensitive, selfish girl who runs away crying, I said. They think I'm a joke. Well, Mr. Henderson said, picking up his phone, let's show them the punchline. The day arrived a week later. It was a perfect, brilliant Saturday in late spring. The air at the cabin was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. It was painfully beautiful. I sat on the porch in one of the rustic wooden rockers, a mug of cold coffee in my hand. My stomach was a knot of ice. I was not alone. Mr. Henderson stood beside me, impeccably dressed in a weekend suit, looking for all the world like a man about to enjoy a pleasant country brunch. Inside the cabin, out of sight, were two local police officers and a stone-faced man in a suit, a fraud investigator from Crestline Financial. "They'll be here soon," Mr. Henderson said, checking his watch. The legal time for the property transfer was 10:00 a.m. It's 10:15. They'll be feeling confident. As if on cue, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel road. My heart hammered against my ribs. A familiar silver sedan, my father's car, rolled into view and parked in the small clearing. The car doors opened and they spilled out. Marlene, Hannah, and Albert. And they were celebrating. Marlene got out, stretched her arms wide, and breathed in the air. "Ah, smell that, Hannah. That's the smell of ours." Hannah was already on her phone, taking a selfie with the cabin in the background. "My new vacation home? I cannot wait to redecorate. This drab green has to go." My father, Albert, was quieter, but he was smiling. He pulled two large suitcases from the trunk. They had packed. They had come to move in. They started walking toward the porch, their faces bright with triumph. They were so lost in their victory that they didn't even see me until they were 10 feet away. It was Marlene who noticed me first. Her celebratory smile froze, then twisted into a sneer. "Amy," she spat, "what are you doing here, trying to get one last look? You're trespassing. This isn't your property anymore." Hannah lowered her phone, her smirk identical to her mother's. "Yeah, Amy, you should have been out by 10. We're the new owners." "New owners," I said. My voice came out surprisingly steady. I slowly stood up from the rocker. "That's interesting. What exactly do you think you own?" "We own this," Marlene said, gesturing to the cabin. "The bank? Well, you know how it is, dear. You defaulted. We bought it. Simple as that, a good investment." "The investment you made," I said, "with the $75,000 fraudulent loan you took out in my name." The color drained from Marlene's face. Hannah's jaw dropped. What are you talking about?" Hannah stammered. "I'm talking about identity theft, Hannah. Forgery, bank fraud." "You can't prove that," Marlene snapped, recovering quickly. "We bought this legally. We have the papers." She waved the fake letter from Mr. Henderson's company. "Actually," Mr. Henderson said, stepping forward. Marlene and Hannah both jumped, not having noticed him. "You have a very convincing, but entirely fake piece of paper. I'm Mr. Henderson, Amy's attorney, and the attorney for the Evelyn Reed Trust." "Trust," Marlene said, her voice small. "Yes," I said, stepping up to the railing. "You see, Mom, that's the part you never understood. Grandma didn't just give me the cabin. She put it in an ironclad, irrevocable trust. It can't be sold. It can't be seized. And it cannot be used as collateral for a loan. Ever." I let the words hang in the air. I watched their minds work, watched the smugness curdle into confusion, and then into raw, primal panic. "The loan you took out," I continued. "It's void. The bank, oh, they are very unhappy with you. They're quite keen to get their $75,000 back." But, Hannah looked at the officers who had chosen that moment to step out onto the porch, followed by the man from the bank. Who are they?" "This," Mr. Henderson said, "is Officer Riley, Officer Cal, and Mr. Bryant from Crestline Financial's fraud division." That was the end. The performance was over. Marlene let out a sound I had never heard before, a high-pitched, strangled wail. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the gravel path. It wasn't a stage fall this time. It was a complete surrender. "No," she shrieked, clawing at the dirt. "No, you can't. Amy, please, we're family." Hannah completely dissolved. She dropped her phone and burst into heaving, hysterical sobs. "It was Mom's idea. It was all her. I didn't want to. Amy, please, don't let them take me. I'll go to jail." They were begging. On their hands and knees, on the doorstep of the cabin they had come to steal, they were begging me for mercy. My father, Albert, just stood by the suitcases, his face the color of wet cement, his mouth opening and closing silently. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Amy, please, a mistake, just a mistake." I looked down at the three of them. My mother, the narcissist, reduced to a groveling mess. My sister, the golden child, exposed as a weak, sniveling coward. My father, the enabler, struck silent by the consequences he had spent his whole life avoiding. I looked at my mother, who was now trying to crawl toward me. "Amy, I'm your mother. You wouldn't do this to your own mother." I thought of the Christmas dinner, the laughter, the casual cruelty. I'd have taken those pills. I looked at her, my face as calm and cold as the lake behind me. "You laughed at Christmas when you said I was trouble. You laughed on the way up here, thinking you'd stolen my home." I took a step back, out of her reach. "Are you laughing now?" The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. I didn't have to do anything else. I just stood on the porch and watched as the system I had set in motion took over. Officer Riley and Officer Cal were professional, calm, and utterly unmoved by my mother's hysterics or my sister's wails. "Ma'am, we need you to stand up. You need to come with us. We have some questions for you down at the station." Marlene and Hannah were helped to their feet. They weren't cuffed, not yet, but they were read their rights. They were placed in the back of one of the squad cars. Mr. Bryant, the bank investigator, collected the fake foreclosure letter and the suitcases as evidence of their intent. My father, Albert, was left standing alone in the driveway, surrounded by the remnants of their celebratory arrival. He looked at me, a broken, empty man. "Amy, I didn't know it was this." "You knew enough, Dad," I said, my voice tired. "You always knew enough, you just chose to laugh." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. He didn't say another word. He just got into his silver sedan, alone, and drove away, following the police car that was carrying his wife and his favorite daughter. Mr. Henderson put a hand on my shoulder. "Are you all right, Amy?" I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for my entire life. "I am now," I said. I did press charges. I pressed them, and so did Crestline Financial. The bank, furious at being so easily duped and desperate to recover their $75,000, threw the full weight of their legal department at them. It was an open and shut case. The paper trail was laughably simple. The new bank account in my name, the large cash withdrawals, the forged documents. Marlene and Hannah turned on each other instantly. Hannah claimed she was a pawn, manipulated by her overbearing mother. Marlene claimed Hannah was the greedy, spoiled one who had come up with the whole plan. The judge was not impressed by either of them. Given it was their first offense, they avoided jail time, but just barely. They were both convicted of multiple felonies: bank fraud, identity theft, and forgery. They were sentenced to 5 years of probation, 1,000 hours of community service each, and, worst of all for them, full financial restitution to Crestline Financial. They had to sell the house. The house I had helped them keep all those years. The house where they had laughed at me. It was all seized and sold to pay back the $75,000 and the associated legal fees. Marlene and Hannah now share a small, grim apartment above a laundromat. Marlene, who so despised work, now bags groceries. Hannah, the artistic soul, works nights cleaning office buildings. My father lives alone. He rents a single room in a boarding house. His enablement and his silence had cost him everything. He calls me sometimes. He leaves long, rambling, maudlin voicemails on my phone. I never listen to them. I just hit delete. The rest of the family, the aunts and uncles who laughed at that Christmas dinner, were horrified. They tried to both sides the situation. "But Amy, it's your mother. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive?" I changed my number. I cut them all off. You don't negotiate with people who laugh at your execution. It's been a year. I'm at the cabin. It's not a cold spring day, it's a warm summer morning. I'm sitting on the porch in my favorite rocker with a hot cup of coffee. The lake is like glass, and the only sound is the call of a loon. It's peaceful, my credit is restored. My name is my own, my home is my own. My grandmother, I realized, hadn't just left me a building. She had left me a fortress. She had seen the war that was coming and had given me the one thing I needed to win it, an unbreachable defense. The trouble they all saw in me, the sensitivity they mocked, was just my refusal to accept their narrative. The meticulous analyst in me, the part they dismissed as boring, was the very thing that saved me. They thought they were playing checkers with a fool. They didn't realize they were playing chess with my grandmother's granddaughter. And the trust she left me wasn't just in property, it was the trust in myself. I was finally, completely at peace.